Adam Soos here for Rebel News. We're on location in Calgary, Alberta at the United Conservative Party's annual general meeting, a meeting at which the 3,600 folks in attendance will vote on key policies that determine the direction of the UCP party and indeed the UCP government moving forward. In this particular report, we're going to be talking to a number of MLAs and ministers about advocacy for Canadian and particularly Albertan energy resources, as well as a pushback against the federal carbon tax.
The Canadian Constitution grants to our province exclusive jurisdiction over the development of our natural resources and the operation of our provincial power grid. And even despite having their unconstitutional Bill C-69, which you know is the No More Pipelines bill, I've been calling that the Don't Build Anything Anywhere legislation, even despite losing on Bill C-69, that legislation was struck down by the Supreme Court. They are still hell-bent on imposing those destructive leftist policies on the people of Alberta. You know what I say to them? Not a chance. Not as long as I'm here.
My father's journey as a young teenager immigrating from the Netherlands, and he came to Alberta because we have these unprecedented levels of freedom and opportunity here, and that's what we need to protect. And that's exactly why Albertans elected a united Conservative government, and that's what we're working hard to do. You know, that requires standing up to a federal government that is shamelessly applying double standards to Western provinces and the Atlantic Canadian region. And we're seeing New Democrat complicity along with that, them voting against the carbon tax as the first motion brought forward in the House. And this is the sort of fight that we have is against a federal government that has no problem bullying Western provinces and Albertans and New Democrats that prop up that government.
Ottawa is trying to crush our livelihood and our spirit. Using their cultish environmental ideology, they seek to crush our businesses, our farms, and our ranches. Albertans are leaders in environmental standards, Mr. Speaker, and we'll take no lessons from people who allow the pouring of billions of liters of raw sewage into the precious habitat for beluga whales.
I mean, when the NDP was in government in Alberta, we saw the massive exodus of businesses and of people leaving the province because there's opportunity elsewhere. I mean, you know, it's kind of a saying we hear a lot now that Alberta's back, and it's because it's true. We're stronger than ever, and that was a lot of work that we had to do to undo the mistakes of the NDP.
Because of new development, they want to double their actual production.
Can we do that again because the siren?
Yeah, and also, Stephen, you need to really condense down what you're saying.
Media bites.
Media bites.
Okay.
So,
okay.
What is Suncor? So just
okay.
You know,
no Canada stuff. Just okay.
Answer the question really directly and boom. Okay.
Yeah.
When we listen to Minister Guilbeault's comments about our oil sands, for example, his comments were about production. They weren't about emissions. And when he made those comments, my first thought was, this isn't about the environment at all. It's not about emissions at all. This is about ideologically shutting down an industry. And, you know, when we saw their decision to obviously, you know, put in place a carve out for Atlantic Canada, that again wasn't about the environment. It was about votes from a government who is tanking in popularity and was frantically and frenetically trying to respond. And I think, honestly, it shows that what we've been doing is working. It's resonating. The Tell the Feds campaign, for example, encouraging Canadians to stand up for affordable and reliable energy and electricity. It's working, and people right across our country are letting the feds know that this is just not okay anymore.
One immediate action that we discussed as premiers that can be taken to address the affordability challenges is to ensure that all Canadians are treated fairly by the federal government when it comes to the federal carbon tax and home heating.
We would love it if there were a silver bullet on climate change. But the carbon tax is not a silver bullet.
The effect of the carbon tax, and is it actually achieving what it was intended to do? And I would say, no, it's not.
We do think that that this deserves a collaborative approach.
And if we just could have got away from this very rigid political doctrine that we have to do this and it has to be across the board for this broad country that we have that's so diverse and different. I think we could have avoided this outcome.
The issue isn't the policy, it's how the policy is being applied, and up until now largely has been somewhat fairly applied across the nation. I don't think anyone can say this today.
I hope that it comes to British Columbia in the same way for the 30,000 people who get that feeling in the pit of their stomach when they hear the fuel pump truck when they hear the fuel truck pull up to fill up their tank and they know a bill's coming in the mail.
There may be other options that emerge in future with technology, but in the meantime, all this is doing is just causing unfairness, making life less affordable, and really harming our most vulnerable as we get into the winter season.
Je pense que c'est la manière gagnante de travailler, puis on s'est entendu à ce sujet-là.
I should just mention we don't have translation.
Yeah, the translation didn't work. So.
But as part of Canada, it should be a bilingual country. So I think it's normal that I can speak in French during a federal council.
The Liberal government, a Liberal NDP coalition, we could call it, they insisted that the carbon tax wasn't going to punish people who were just trying to pay their bills. But then they say, oh, wait, in order to help these people pay their bills, we're going to drop the carbon tax. Have they shot their own argument in the foot?
I think they totally shot their own argument in the foot. Again, the whole argument for a carbon tax is broken down. It doesn't work. It just adds cost. I've recently drafted a letter to Chrystia Freeland saying, listen, if you think about hospitals, schools, post-secondary, and supportive housing, some of the people that need help the most, they all have to pay carbon tax on the utilities to the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah. Technically, I think that's a look at unconstitutional because those are all fully funded or mostly funded by tax dollars, and you can't tax a tax. Yeah. Which the carbon tax is doing. Yeah. So again, it breaks down constitutionally, and if the federal Liberals want to help people who are vulnerable, they're in hospital or kids at school or post-secondary students or those seniors who need supportive housing, then you would exempt that at the very least. But I think the whole carbon tax should go because they've proven the argument that it hurts everybody in Canada. And you know what? We're getting support from the NDP-led BC government. We're getting support from, well, Atlantic Canada was putting the same pressure on. Saskatchewan, Manitoba, now led by the NDP, they're also concerned about these costs. So it doesn't matter what the provincial government is. The federal government has to treat us fairly. We are getting a raw deal because the federal government and Justin Trudeau said no more carve-outs. They're not even looking at Alberta's need and the fact that most of our heating comes from natural gas. Yes. Now, if the whole intent of the carbon tax was to get people off more GHG emissions, then the last thing you do is home oil heating fuel. Right. But they did it anyways. And then they said no to natural gas. It doesn't make any sense on an ideological level. Right. It seems to be strictly for politics and buying votes in Atlantic Canada. You know what? Treat all Canadians fairly. That's all Alberta has ever asked for, is treat us fairly and allow us to get there in an equitable way.
You know, just take the carbon tax, for example, and the recent carve-out that Trudeau's Liberals have made for heating oil in Atlantic Canada. Right. I mean, this is just one of many examples, one of many ways where you know, Trudeau, with, you know, being propped up by NDP puppets, have really shown their true colors. That frankly they don't care about provincial autonomy. They don't care what the Constitution has to say and the rights that it grants us and the jurisdiction that we're granted in the Constitution. And it's shameful. You know, I'll go back to this carbon tax carve-out because it came weeks after activist Minister Stephen Guilbeault said that Alberta would not be granted flexibility as he slapped the draft CER on us, showing that he has no understanding of the electrical grid and the uniqueness here in Alberta with our industrial load. Just zero understanding of that and zero willingness to work with us. I mean, in Saskatchewan, you saw the Saskatchewan NDP support their government's opposition to the carbon tax and to the clean electricity regulations. We saw the federal NDP support Pierre Poilievre's motion around the carbon tax. We introduced a motion in the House this week, really recognizing the fact that the carbon tax is driving up the cost of living on everything from groceries to fuel to home utilities. This is completely unacceptable, and yet the NDP again chose to stand with
Justin Trudeau and ignore the very real affordability concerns of Albertans. I mean, I just think this was such an opportunity for them to put politics aside. And again, they chose not to. The Premier, after the election, said, we're going to show leadership. We're going to be the adults in the room. We're going to sit down with the federal government with data and give them an opportunity to use common sense and put common sense before ideology. And once again, we saw what we've seen over the last number of years is that, you know, Minister Guilbeault goes overseas and says whatever he needs to appease the climate activists, right? I mean, that's hugely concerning. And we've said, look, we're not going to accept the clean electricity regulations, the oil and gas cap, that infringement on our provincial jurisdiction, especially when we know that our industry is leading the way and can help us reduce emissions worldwide. If it's really about emissions, we should in fact be supporting Alberta's major industries. And so, you know, as Premier has said, you know, we always hope that we don't have to use the Alberta Sovereignty Within United Canada Act, but we will absolutely use every tool that we have to continue to defend Albertans.
Look at natural gas. The federal government says natural gas is possibly bad. I mean, I don't know what they're thinking. Right now, Germany's going back to burning coal. They're going back to importing LNG from other countries on floating rigs because they can't get it from Russia and other jurisdictions. The truth is that, you know what? More Alberta energy is good energy for the world. If we want to lower emissions in the world, the best thing we can do is have Alberta energy and burn that, because we know that we're going to abate that. We're going to have the first carbon abated oil field of any jurisdiction in the world, and we're proud to do that. I mean, let's face it, we have all the natural advantages here in this province. We have lithium, we have natural gas, we have oil and bitumen. We have so many things, and people may not realize it, but natural gas can be made into so many different products. Even bitumen, you know, oil sands can be made into so many products and more. We're investing in opportunities for technology to change the world. We're looking and hoping for things to replace steel, to replace other products that are in short supply, or frankly, as they're burned or as they're created, they create too many emissions that the world doesn't want. And as far as emissions go, capital markets are saying they want less emissions in their production of energy. You know what? If that's what they need, if that's what it's going to take to sell our product to the world, well, what we have to make sure of in the process is that more of that value chain stays in Alberta. More products, more value, better quality of life for Albertans. It's all about the people, and that's what we have to make sure we do.
We continue to meet with the federal government. We continue to oppose their unfair practices. We've taken them and challenged them in court constitutionally. We did get the Supreme Court ruling a couple weeks ago on Bill C-69. Right. We are doing that work. We've got an Ottawa steering group to work on the clean electricity regulations. So our entire government is unified and full court press to make sure that the federal government hears that Alberta is not going to just bow down to these things.
I found it really interesting, Adam, that Trudeau recently, I think it was in September, spoke in Montreal at the Global Progress Action Summit. And he talked about the need for progressives to be able to reach out to folks in everyday concerns, and for people to be able to relate to these progressive ideals. And he talked about affordability. I mean, give me a break. I mean, there is no government more detached with the realities of raising a family or running a business than this government. And he talked about an inclusive economy. Tell me what that means. I mean, Trudeau is not supporting an inclusive economy, and this carbon tax carve-out, a perfect example of that.
The growing strength of our party is so critical to the future of our province and to the future of our country, because Canada needs Alberta to be a national leader. Millions across our great nation look to our province to protect and foster the principles of freedom, of civil rights, of free enterprise, and economic prosperity. They look to us to demonstrate the power of compassionate conservatism and show why we are creating a powerhouse and a job-creating economy like ours, and why that's crucial to delivering the healthcare and education and public safety and social support programs that our citizens need without mortgaging our children's futures with crushing debt and high taxes.
Our Premier, with her leadership, with our election, she has led through listening and unity. And I think our team has really coalesced around that. And the grassroots has become engaged. They know that Alberta stands the best chance when we have a Conservative government to make sure our economy is rolling, to make sure that the grassroots values of the people of Alberta are being stood up for and they're being listened to. So I'm really proud. I'm really excited about the optimism in the room. I'm excited about the energy in the room and where we're going to make Alberta a leader in all of Confederation.
I'm a very proud Albertan that recognizes that for a long time we've had a raw deal from the federal government. That's got to end, and under this government, it's ending.
Premier Danielle Smith has been doing such an exceptional job of really uniting our caucus, uniting our party, getting people excited about the grassroots movement. And I think that's what you see here. I mean, our panel, the convention has hardly even begun, and there is standing room only in this convention center. Like, that's wild. It's exciting. It's energizing. And I do think, people are standing up and saying, essentially, thank you, and coming out to make sure that we continue to advocate on their behalf. And I think some of the frustration with the federal government and the lack of common sense from the NDP, that of course drives it as well.
Well, it is certainly refreshing to hear from MLAs and ministers alike who are no longer apologizing, but instead advocating for our energy sectors as well as our energy resources, and insisting without apologies that they will push back against the federal carbon tax in order to make life affordable. For more stories like these, you can go to nogreenreset.com. And as always, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Soos. Well, it's great to be here bringing you the other side of the story, covering this UCP AGM with the near 3,700 now people gathered behind me. I just want to encourage you, bringing our team out here, having all our camera people who are doing incredible work right now, filming this as we speak. Well, bringing those people out, there's costs involved with that. Unlike the mainstream media that gets massive handouts, we rely on your support. So please, if you're able, consider chipping in just a few bucks to keep us telling the other side of the story at rebelfieldreports.com.